My name is Austin Knight. I'm a UX designer at HubSpot. Show of hands, how many people here have heard of HubSpot? Maybe you're familiar with us. Okay, cool. So just in case you haven't heard of HubSpot, we are a software as a service company based out of Boston, Massachusetts, and we produce marketing and sales software primarily for small to medium-sized businesses and sometimes enterprises. As a UX designer at HubSpot, I oversee the user experience design for all of our primary web properties. So HubSpot.com, Inbound.com, the HubSpot blog. These receive somewhere around 6 million hits per month. So they're high-impact properties that we're really trying to get down to the science of B2B web design. Big part of what I do with that is user testing, qualitative research. How many of you are familiar with terms like that? You know what user testing is? Good, so we're going to be okay. That's like a prerequisite. If you don't know what user testing is, essentially, what it is a designer will take the product or app or whatever it is that they're designing, and they'll put it in front of actual users, get feedback from those users, and use that information to drive the design forward, rather than just sitting inside of like stakeholder meetings and deliberating over what they think is the best design internally. They're letting their actual prospective customers and users say, hey, this is what I think you should do with this design. So as a UX designer, I interface with a lot of that, and I also get to go to a lot of meetings that discuss design. And designers really like to drop ominous words of wisdom whenever they come into meetings. A popular one is this one. Oh, I have not plugged this thing in. Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. That was coined by Leonardo da Vinci. Lots of people like to say that one. One that I hadn't heard yet, however, was hold my beer. And when I was thinking about this, I realized there might actually be something in this. Like this could be a mantra with which we could drive some of our UX efforts at HubSpot. And apparently, I wasn't alone in that thought. A couple years ago, this guy, Will Dable, he's an Australian guy, he published a video called The User is Drunk on YouTube. And it went viral within the UX community, which means that it topped out at like 200,000 views and then it just died off. But we're really proud of it, and we still talk about it today. He goes over a lot of really sound UX principles in this video, but the core concept that you walk away with is that your product or your website should be so simple and so well designed that even a drunk person could use it. It's simple, but it changes the way that you think about design, right? So, got this really, really groundbreaking concept. And naturally, whenever you have a groundbreaking concept like this, there are going to be people that want to take it entirely too far. And when I watched this video, I quickly realized that I wanted to be one of those people. So that is how I met this guy. This is Richard. He's just an everyday lover of the web. He likes to talk about design. And he also had a service where you could pay him to get drunk and critique your website. This is actually a screenshot from his website. Yeah, his rate went up when I took this screenshot. It used to be $250, but went up to $500 because he was so in demand. Basically, what it was is you could go to him, give him some money, he'd do a drunk review of your website, and that would be a fun little thing that you could do to share with internally or with your customers or whatever. So when I realized, okay, I've got this groundbreaking concept that says that design should be so simple that even drunk people could use it, and I have a person willing to be that drunk person, then my next logical conclusion was I need to figure out how to get my employer to pay him to do that test on HubSpot.com. That's exactly what we did. We ran a drunk user test on HubSpot.com with Richard. We got some really interesting feedback out of it. It turned out to be like 15 or 20 minutes long, as most user tests do. But what I'll do quickly here is just show you some of the highlights from that test. We got sound? There we go.
Not drunk enough.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. He said every time, whoa, man, whoa, it's moving, grow your traffic, whoa, highlighted, leads. Everyone's allegedly leads like the town in England. This is cool. I like the highlighting. I like the 3 dots. I'm finding it hard to focus on anything else on the page, but whatever. What's email 2.0? I think I'm still on the email 1.0. Isn't everyone on the email 1.0? What is this? Can I click here? Willkommen bei der Marketingplattform Nummer 1. Die waren in 11.000. I don't know how to say that in German. Hi. I totally can't read Japanese. Alright. You guys are a really successful site. And this is a lot of footer. When your footer can take up your entire page on a 15-inch monitor, you probably have too much footer. So, all I really know about you is that you do marketing and you help me grow. I just don't think you guys are meant for drunk users. I think you guys are meant for users who are really I don't know what kind of users you guys. It sounds like you're meant for large-scale clients who are willing to spend money on buzzwords.
So that hurt a little. This actually sent shockwaves through our company. This got circulated all around. And part of the reason that it hurt so much is because it was some really honest, hard, direct feedback that we hadn't heard before, but in a certain sense, we knew that our site was failing in this capacity. So we identified 2 key areas where the site was failing, and we decided to improve on them. The first area was communicating the community impact that HubSpot has for its customers. We have entire communities of HubSpot superfans that come out and love the product. It's something that is an integral part of their life, and we just weren't communicating that in the design at all. And we also failed to communicate the true business impact that HubSpot has for its customers. We have over 19,000 customers in over 90 countries around the globe whose businesses depend on HubSpot as the lifeblood of their business. And when we look at that design that we had, none of this was really coming out. None of the magic that people associate with HubSpot, the things that really prove how the software transforms their business, none of it was coming out. We were just another software as a service website. At the same time, if we had taken a quick search to Twitter, we would see all of this coming directly from people who love our product. This person, Stephanie, I really like her. She tweeted #motherfucker about a CRM. So that's somebody getting really, really excited over software. During Inbound, that's our annual event that we host in Boston. It's an industry event. It happened last September, and it will happen again this year. We launched a new freemium product called Lead-In, and people were super excited about it. Again, a piece of software. One person got so excited that they impromptu proposed the PM of Lead-In to marry them. If we look at this design, though, again, where is all of that? It's just a bland SaaS website. So we took this information, iterated on the design a few times, tested it, and then eventually landed on a design that looks something like this. So if you go to HubSpot.com today, your experience on the homepage will be something that looks like this. This design utilizes HubSpot Smart Content, so it will determine who you are as a user, put you into a certain bucket, and then actually change the experience based on that. But for the most part, this is what it's going to look like. So it was good. We saw conversion rate went up, specifically from the homepage to our product pages. That's a KPI for our homepage. We saw exit rate went down. And we also saw that pain point exhibiting behaviors went down. People were less likely to search from our homepage or go directly from the homepage to the FAQ. Good things were happening as a result of this. So we think back to this really harsh feedback that Richard gave us. And it'd be really, really easy to dismiss that as a designer. Because I work with the people every day who built that page. And they're really smart people. They're well-educated. They have years and years of experience. They tested the design. They did everything that you're supposed to do when you create that design, right? They're well-qualified to do their jobs, but they still produced a design that a drunk person completely hated. So it would be easy to say, hey, you know what? He doesn't know what he's talking about. Forget that guy's feedback. We know what we're talking about. We're going to keep our design. But we didn't. We took his feedback and we used it humbly to improve our design, despite the fact that we were attached to the original one. And what this represented for us was not harsh feedback, but rather, in the end, true business impact. We were able to take this really, really direct feedback that Richard gave us and turn it into something that actually moved the important metrics for our business. There's a problem, though. This really, really direct and honest style of feedback is actually pretty rare in standard user testing scenarios. People don't usually say stuff that honest. So this poses a few questions. First, what caused the drunk user test to be so great? And second, does the user actually need to be drunk in order to provide us the level of feedback that we want? So I can answer that second question very succinctly, and that is no. I believe that with the proper approach, you can take any standard user testing scenario and generate high-quality feedback of the nature that Richard gave us. So that's a little bit of what I want to talk about today. First question when we think about the ways to get that feedback is, what are the different types of tests that we can run to pull qualitative feedback from our users? So I'm going to speak to that briefly to sort of set the scene for everything that we're going to be discussing later on down the line. There are two core buckets of qualitative user tests that you can run. There are definitely a lot of different branches that come off of these as different styles of user tests, but for the most part, these are the two types of tests that you're going to be looking at. The first is in-person moderated user testing, and the second is remote unmoderated user testing. So just to break that down real quick, an in-person moderated test would look something like this. You have the designer on the left and the user on the right in the same physical location. And as the user is going through the designer has the opportunity to interject and course correct, ask probing questions, basically just impact the test as it's happening. By contrast, in a remote unmoderated user test, you have the user in a completely different location than the designer or the moderator. And there is no moderation. The designer does not have the ability to interject during the test or course correct or anything like that. The result that you get out of a remote unmoderated user test is usually just a canned video of the user going through a process like this, where you have, you've developed a screener, some tasks, an actual design for the user to use. You take a user, put them through that process, and then you get a result out the other end of it, which looks like this. A 15 to 20-minute recording of somebody using your website, but they weren't impacted in any way during that test outside of the tasks that you had pre-created. This is the type of test that we ran with Richard. We just gave him some stuff to do, he got drunk, did it, and shipped us a video. So now that we know the two different types of tests that we can run, how can we use these tests to get great feedback out of everyday users? So I want to talk about the most responsible ways to approach user testing. We can break this down into three core categories, the first of which is segmentation, the second is testing, and the third is the results gathering and distribution process. For segmentation, first and foremost, you want to make sure that you know your demographic. This should seem really obvious, but the key here is that you don't serve your test to somebody that the test is completely irrelevant to. For example, for us, if we serve our website that talks about a software product to somebody that doesn't use B2B software products, they won't comment on the actual copy. They won't understand the terminology that we use. They'll start saying that they don't like the color orange that we use, which is something that would be very difficult for us to change at this stage. We're kind of married to it. So making sure that you deliver the test to generally the right person is important so that they'll actually give you feedback in the first place. Demographics are really high-level stuff. This is a set of demographics that you could use for a qualitative user test. Age, income, gender, if you want that, country, web expertise, whatever that means. Super high-level stuff, just generally making sure that you're going to get the right sort of category of person. And then you can get more specific by asking multiple qualifying questions. Skipped a slide there. Before a user actually goes into the test. So this would be something called a screener. This is a set of screeners that would accompany the set of demographics that you just saw. You have 2 questions that are basically qualifying the user as the type of person that we want to take our test. First question, which of the following do you have the most experience with? If you say marketing, you're going to get through the test because we want marketers to take our test. The important thing here is that we're not leading the user into what type of user we actually want to recruit. If we would have said, do you have experience with marketing, yes or no, it would have been very obvious that we want you to answer yes. And because users get paid to take these tests, there's actually incentive for them to lie to your screeners so that they can get through to the test and take it. And then what's going to happen is you're going to have a wrong expectation for the type of person that's going to be taking your test. They're not going to be properly qualified. They're not going to provide good feedback because they don't know what they're talking about. So making sure that you don't lead the user into what type of person you're screening for is really important. So first thing here is we screen for marketers. Then we're going to qualify them as the caliber of marketer that we actually want and potentially qualify them again just in case they had lied to the previous screener and by chance gotten through. So here we ask a question that only a marketer would be able to answer. The important thing here is that all of the other acronym answers that are up there are not real things, so it's not possible for somebody to get confused and accidentally disqualify themselves from the test. Now for the testing portion. You want to run a pilot test. Whenever you run a qualitative user test, you're going to create, again, a screener, a set of tasks, an actual design for the user to interact with. You're going to take a single user and put them through that process, and then you're going to get a result out the other end. However, what you may find is that when the user goes through that process, they may get stumped at a certain point, or they may not know what you're asking them to do. So, for example, we could say our user goes through this set of tasks that we create, they get to task number 3, and they're like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. That completely ruins the feedback and the results that we were trying to get. We didn't get anything for task 3 when that happens, and that's because we formulated that task wrong. So rather than taking all of your users, having them all get stumped on task number 3, and having all of your feedback for task number 3 get ruined, in the end result, you take a single user, put them through that process, notice the issue with task number 3, fix it, and then take all of your users and put them through it with a fixed task so that you can get the feedback that you're actually looking for. This is essentially a user test for your user test. Super simple step, but very often overlooked. And then, once you have your pilot test completed, you're going to want to run your full test with 3 to 5 users. That number is a little counterintuitive when we think of standard testing practices with quantitative data. We want anywhere from 5,000 to 50,000, 100,000, maybe even 1 million, depending on your traffic volume for a quantitative test. However, with a qualitative test, we found that the optimal number of users to run it with is actually 3 to 5. Once you go over that, you're going to start getting a lot of duplicate feedback, which is fine. But the best strategy would be to say if you have a budget of 50 qualitative user tests for a year, rather than run all 50 user tests on one single design and get every single little piece of feedback, run a user test with 3 to 5 users, get the high-level feedback, fix it in an iteration, ship that next iteration, run it again with 3 to 5 users, get that high-level feedback, ship it again. So it's an iterative process where you're constantly getting the highest level stuff that people are noticing the most, and that's what they actually care about. And then you can much more efficiently use the budget that you have for your user testing, because these things can get a little expensive depending on how you do it. Next, make sure that you pair the data. If you're collecting any quantitative data, while you're collecting the qualitative data, you want to make sure that you take those 2 data sets and you overlay them on top of each other and look for the areas where both sets of data are telling you the same thing. Those are undoubtedly the greatest pain points and the highest areas of opportunity. This can be a difficult thing to do, especially with qualitative data. A really easy way to do it is through something called the rainbow spreadsheet. It's really simple. X-axis is the common point of feedback. Y-axis is each user that went through the test. So here we've got like common things that people say. At the top, user is annoyed by the slow login process. Every single user had that issue. We know that is one of the greatest pain points. That's one of the things that we need to focus on the most. And we may actually be able to see that the same thing was happening in the quantitative data. We can see both of those interactions happening. So this is a really great way to take sort of like fluffy, up-in-the-air feedback and turn it into something a little more actionable. Use tangential and unsolicited feedback. Because you're running tests with humans, they're going to go off course. They're going to say things that are not completely related to what you were testing for. That's totally OK. Record it anyway. All feedback in a user test is good feedback, even if it's not for the specific piece that you were testing at that moment. There are a lot of drawbacks that come with remote unmoderated user testing, and all of them go away when you start collecting unsolicited feedback. So think about a standard remote unmoderated user testing scenario. You've got a person that's browsing the web with a screen recorder on. They have tasks. You're literally telling them what to do. Nobody actually browses the web this way. So as a result of that, you're not going to get completely 100% sound feedback. That's where a lot of the magic of the designer comes in, is they have to interpret that information and be able to get around the issues that arise naturally from remote unmoderated user testing. However, when you get unsolicited feedback, all of that stuff goes away. This stuff is natural. It's from somebody that was just using your product and decided to share their experience with you on their own. There are a lot of different ways that you can collect this, one of which may be through support tickets. People are having issues with your product. They're having issues with your website. They're going to tell your support reps about it. You're going to want to hear about that so that you can fix it in the design. If you have sales reps in your organization, jump on phone calls with them. Meet with the actual people that are interested in buying your product. For me, this has been transformative. I get to know through sales calls what users or prospective buyers are actually interested in. When the salesperson talks to a potential customer, they've been going over their pitch multiple times, figuring out what resonates with the customers and what they need to say based on the persona that they're speaking to in order to get them interested in the product. I'm trying to do the same thing on the website. It's important to combine those efforts so that you can have a consistent experience and you can also do a little bit of a knowledge share there. Whatever is important to somebody in the actual sales process could also be very important to them in the top of the funnel web experience that they have. So, as a bit of a recap, for segmentation, know your demographic, ask multiple qualifying questions. Testing, run a pilot test, run it with 3 to 5 users. Don't inadvertently lead the user. Pair your data for the results gathering and distribution process, and use tangential and unsolicited feedback. I'll leave this up here for a little bit if you want to take pictures for your notes. A really good tool that I mentioned earlier is the Rainbow spreadsheet. So there's some information that I'll share with you at the end of the talk that will give a source for how you can learn more about that. All right, so what are the ideal tools that we can use for these tests now that we know the different types of tests that we can run and the best ways in which we can run them? This is I want to talk about the tools that are actually worth using, and this is the entire section right here. So one slide, this is all of the stuff that's actually worth discussing. You got a couple different options. The first route that you can take is you can use an all-in-one platform. This is good because it's really, really easy and it's fast. You'll get turnaround within 1 to 3 hours. And what they do is they actually pair a panel of users with a software, and you can run it all in one place. The drawback is that you have a little bit less control as a designer or developer, and so you have less control over the test. And also, it's more expensive than if you just do it on your own. So your options for all-in-one platforms are usertesting.com, UserZoom, TryMyUI. They're all basically the same thing. If you don't want to do that, then you can pair a screen recorder with a participant recruiting method. The positives here are that it's cheaper and you have a lot more control. The drawback is that it takes exponentially more time and commitment from your end. So if you want to use a screen recorder, there's a lot of different ways that you can do this. Silverback was specifically built for user testing. Screencastify is a Chrome extension. Loop 11 was also built for user testing. And you can even use WebEx and Google Hangouts, which I'm sure every single person in this room has access to that, to record a user test. And then you're going to need people to actually take the test. So you can recruit your participants through a gigantic panel at utest.com. Ethnio and Hotjar will recruit users from your live site. So this is free. This is really good. But the drawback is that you're only going to be able to get users that are actually on your site. So if you need people that haven't interacted with you previously, that's not going to work there. Amazon Mechanical Turk, Craigslist, those job boards are really effective. And I always like to plug this agency called Nobility. What they will do is specifically connect you with a user tester that has a disability. So if you're testing for accessibility and you want to test against a specific disability, then they will find somebody that can test your website or your product for you and give you feedback from their point of view. If you want a blended form of data that's going to cross the bounds between qualitative and quantitative, you can use services like Usabilla, Usability Hub, Optimal Workshop, and Spectlet. Those are all really powerful tools that don't exactly do user testing and don't exactly do quantitative data collection, but they exist somewhere in between. All right, so now we know the different types of user tests to run, the best ways to run them, and the tools that we can use to run them. But how can we set ourselves up for success proactively and actually create designs that we know are going to perform well in a qualitative user test? So I want to talk about the best ways to design for drunks, or for that matter, all users. First and foremost, don't design in a vacuum. If there's any key takeaway for this talk, I think this is it. This is the key theme that we're getting at here. Don't let your CEO, CMO, or junior designer dictate your design. Let your users get actual, actionable feedback from the people that are going to be using your product. This is an MVP. This is the first Apple computer. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak built this thing in a garage and then took it to a computer fair, got a bunch of feedback on it, and took that information back to their garage, iterated on it multiple times, and then eventually came up with their version of a personal computer. They were using real user feedback to gauge whether or not there was actually demand for the product that they were creating, what features people actually wanted if they were going to be purchasing the product. So it's taking a very informed approach to design and not designing inside the vacuum of your own hallways. Good design is invisible. This is a little bit of an abstract concept, but essentially what it says is that the best designs are so well made that users don't even notice them because they're too busy accomplishing what they set out to do. These aren't the designs that you're going to see on award sites like awards.com or the Future of Web Awards or anything like that. These aren't the designs that are making a splash or making some type of statement or breaking the boundaries of the web. Rather, these are the humble servants of design that are just helping people to accomplish what they came to the site or the product to accomplish and be on their merry way. This is an example of the opposite of an invisible design. This design pattern has been around for probably a couple years now. It's something called a welcome mat. If you haven't had the pleasure of interacting with a welcome mat, essentially what it does is as soon as the content on the page loads up, which is what you came to the site for, it pushes all of that content down and then says, hey, how about you give us your email address? Which is exactly what you didn't come to the site for. So this is disrespectful to the user. This is not an invisible design. This is taking them out of the flow that they were originally in. The only issue with this is that with a certain portion of the population, it actually works. Like these things, for some reason, convert. So if there's anybody in this room that shares their email address with welcome mats, please stop doing it so that I don't get pressured to use this on HubSpot.com anymore, because it's driving me crazy. But so there are certain ways that non-invisible designs work, and they do have their place. But in the grand scheme of things, you're going to be best off if you actually strive to create a friendly design and an invisible design. Don't overcomplicate or oversimplify. So we talk a lot about not overcomplicating things, making sure that they're simple, but very rarely do we talk about not oversimplifying things, and actually both are very important. And the key idea here is that simplicity does not necessarily mean less, Rather, it means just enough. So it's somewhere in between complicated and simple. Make sure that you're still, in the effort to be simple, make sure you're still providing the features that are necessary for your user and their interaction with your product. This is an example of an overcomplicated design. Probably can't see it in the back, but the title for this application is bulk rename utility. All this thing does is rename files. But the design is really intense. This is super tragic, especially for this audience. I usually speak to designers, but I always feel bad whenever I bring this thing up to developers, but I'm going to do it anyway. If you Google search what happens when you let engineers design interfaces, this is the first thing that populates in Google. And I can say that with confidence because my fiance is an engineer, and I showed her this design, and she looked at it, and she was like, yeah, that thing is pretty much perfect. So that's an overcomplicated design. I know that probably most of you have not built something like this, so not trying to crap all over you up here. At the other end, this is an oversimplified design. Where is the start menu? I don't know. It also lacks visual hierarchy, which brings me to my next point. You always want to make sure that you're utilizing visual hierarchy in your designs, and that you're helping the user to understand what it is that you want them to do when they come into your product or into your website. Good test for this is something called the Drunk User Test extension. It's another thing that you can install in Chrome, and basically what it does is it blurs your website and it moves it around on the page almost as if to simulate what it would be like for a drunk person to look at the website. Kind of takes the fun out of it, but basically what it does is it demonstrates visual hierarchy. So if you can blur your website and move it around and still figure out what the key action is, then you probably have strong visual hierarchy. Here, I'm assuming that this designer probably wants me to click on the big blue blob off to the right hand of the page. Unsurprisingly, that's the sign up button. That's the key action that Dropbox is going to want me to take here. So strong visual hierarchy. Organize information intuitively. So you want your users to always know where they are in your website or your app and where they're going. Give them a strong sense of direction. A good way to map this out is through something like this. This is a mobile app user flow. Really straightforward stuff. Basically what the designer is doing here is saying, hey, this is the path through the app. These are the interactions that I expect. This is how I expect the user to use this thing, and it'll help you to visualize what that's actually going to look like and what the rabbit hole at the bottom right-hand corner might actually feel like to the user that's trying to get there. Confirm user actions. So you always want to have a feedback loop with your users so that they know that you know that something happened. So this could be through confirmation messages, subtle animations, micro interactions. Here's an example. This is Reddit's the button as a micro interaction. When the user clicks it, the whole thing goes boom, and you know, OK, that action that I just did, it was registered by their system. And finally, I think I might be preaching to the choir here, but optimize your site speed. Run speed tests, compress images, minify your code. 3 seconds, that's the amount of time that you have for your website to load before the average user is going to leave. $1.6 billion, that is the amount of money that Amazon determined they would lose in a single sales year with a 1-second delay in their load time. So this is important stuff. People actually care about how fast your product is. Recap. Don't design in a vacuum. Good design is invisible. Don't overcomplicate or oversimplify. Use visual hierarchy. Organize information intuitively. Confirm user actions. And optimize site speed. If you do that, I am willing to wager that you will be able to take feedback that was previously only attainable with drunk users and pull it out of everyday, normal, sober user testing scenarios at your organizations. If you want more information on the sources or the tools that I talked about in this talk, if you want to watch the entire drunk user test in all of its glory, you can go to this short link that was popping up throughout the talk at uxd.to/drunk. I've built a page specifically for this talk. If you want to get in touch with HubSpot, their information's on the left, my information's on the right. I'll be sticking around after the talk to answer questions and talk with anyone that's interested. Thank you.